go straight through to item 11, and I would like to finish the open agenda before we take a lunch break, I think. If we can, we'll see how we go. We'll go to Plans and Places, and that's the statutory work program. I believe this is straightforward. Do I have a mover for the statutory work program? Deputy Chair, Councillor Denise Lee. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Councillor Cooper, thank you. And we have for this always different names on the list to the ones that pop up. John Durgood, Phil Reid. We've read the report that you've penned here, I think, Phil, or Jasmine, wasn't it? Yep. And Tony Reedy and Phil, you're here for them. And John, is there anything further you would like to add? I think it's pretty clear.
No, we're happy to just answer any questions.
Questions, members? There being none, I will put it to vote. All those in favour? Member Namani.
Kia ora, John. Just a bit curious, and it could be that you know, it hasn't necessarily been scoped out yet, and that's part of the whole work program. Just keen on whether you've thought about what the role of mana whenua mātāwaka might be in monitoring the effectiveness of the unitary plan. Wonder if you've kind of put thoughts to that, and also know you're looking at the new amendments to the RMA in relation to the mana whakahono arohi iwi participation agreements, and also acknowledge that at perhaps a different level other agreements are being developed, and you know, there's potentially duplication there, and I just wondered, is that all kind of being thought about at this point in time? Has it been landed?
Yeah, so through the Chair and Phil may be able to add to this, but in terms of your first question around monitoring the unitary plan, there is a piece of work underway already where we are working with mana whenua on the cultural impact assessment, or the CIA provisions in the unitary plan, or rather the cultural impact assessment process that Council's undertaking. So that's a piece of work that the research and monitoring unit within Sharks area are undertaking with our support, and we've got good engagement from mana whenua. So that's a very specific topic, but the broader involvement of mana whenua in monitoring the unitary plan as a whole, not just the cultural values side of things. It is early days. We would like to come back to the committee. We will come back to the committee with an overall monitoring framework, and as part of that, very definitely talk about how we will engage with and involve mana whenua in things like how well is the unitary plan protecting the coastal environment, water quality, biodiversity, and cultural heritage. So early days yet, that's probably all I can say.
Might just add to that a little bit through the Chair. So the iwi participation agreement approach under the Act does provide for, when iwi do approach us to invite us to enter into an agreement, for the monitoring of the effectiveness of the plan to actually be a specific part of that discussion. So we are anticipating that could well actually be part of what does happen over the next year or so when those requests come in.
Because a request isn't that hard to make, and it could come tomorrow.
That's right.
So I'm just wanting to kind of get a sense of the readiness and kind of the, you know, at hand around that. And I think perhaps at some point in the future it would be really helpful to understand that, not as a subset of the broader stuff, but actually in relation to the RMA and mana whenua and some of the changes, and how this council's going to kind of manage that, potentially across things that aren't, I'm just thinking relationships, agreements, generally, and how the two dovetail. There's just something in there that'll be really helpful at some point to kind of get a report back.
So absolutely, again,
if at all possible, or if useful.
So through the Chair, in terms of the wider discussions with mana whenua around relationship with Council, that work has been led by Te Waka Angamua, but we're working, the Plans and Places Department, Te Waka Angamua and IMSB Secretariat are starting to develop some ideas around broader agreements with mana whenua, and in particular the mana whakahono arohi provisions in the RMA now, and how that all stitches together. So I'll speak to Graham Pryor in Te Waka Angamua, and we'll work out the right forum to bring back a report to this committee or the governing body on that.
Okay, that's really positive that attention's been about integrating that, because there's potentially a lot of duplication of effort that's unnecessary.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Casey, question?
Yeah, just following on from a question my colleague Councillor Filipina asked a wee bit earlier about special housing areas. We know how many houses are being built through the unitary plan, but do we know how much low-cost housing is being built? Is there any monitoring of filling that gap?
This report addresses the appeals, and as I replied to Councillor Filipina before, and I think you are referring to some news that's been on the RNZ today, possibly.
Yep.
And that will be addressed in a forthcoming workshop, for which I've requested information on a status monitoring report on all our SHAs, on supply, and the number of dwellings built, the number of affordables as per the criteria under the Accord. We will have all of that at the workshop. The data, as I mentioned just before, for the end of June is just coming in. So,
Thanks, Mr Chairman. It's just that in the report itself there is discussion of monitoring of the unitary plan. It was just a...
it's the monitoring of the SHAs as opposed to the planning.
No,
provision.
specifically I'm asking now about the unitary plan. We know how many houses are being built. I'm asking about low-cost housing. Is there any oversight of that?
Plan. It's not in the unitary.
Of the unitary plan.
Well, through Chair, as part of an overall monitoring of the unitary plan as a whole, there will be a component around housing supply and potentially within that the impact of the unitary plan on affordability. There's a lot of work happening in that space through the Chief Economist's Office, REMU, Research and Monitoring Unit. We're not leading work around monitoring affordability ourselves in the Plans and Places Department, but take the point as part of monitoring the unitary plan, housing supply and affordability within that is a component of what should be monitored. So when we come back with the monitoring program for the unitary plan, you can expect to see something on that.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Just a question of clarification, maybe you, Mr Chair, or John. We don't have a mechanism in the unitary plan to around retained affordability, do we? Because we didn't vote for that in the unitary plan, so there's no ability to monitor that in terms of that mechanism because we don't have it. Is that right? I'm just getting confused about all these questions because we didn't put that into the unitary plan.
No inclusionary zoning was lost by a vote by the former council.
Divided.
Thank you.
So members, it's moved, it's seconded, and I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, Tony Reedy, the author of that report, down in the starboard quarter there. And we'll now go